Greetings, everyone. My name is Kate Rademacher, and we're here with Writing for Your Life. This is our open mic night of April 2025, and I'm so excited. These events are really fun. We've had a couple in the past 18 months that have gone really well, and I'm so excited to be back for another open mic night, a chance for members of our community and the general public to participate and hear readings from some of our emerging and leading authors. So thank you for joining. So just briefly before we begin, a few housekeeping items. So each speaker is going to have 5 minutes to speak, and I'll be timing. If you're reading and you want feedback, so if you have questions for the group about, feedback or input you want, whether that's about the substance of your writing or your presentation, please leave time in your 5-minute slot for that. So maybe read for 4 minutes or 3.5 minutes or whatever. So, and then if you can ask the group what kind of feedback you're looking for, that's really helpful. People can also provide feedback in the chat bar. And what I just remind us all is that this is a safe space, and I encourage us to be constructive, of course, and supportive. One question that might be helpful is if this person were to read again, what do you affirm about their reading, or what might you suggest for future readings or future events like this as a way to structure your feedback. And then we're going to go through, we have a full list of people who've signed up, and we have a very full waiting list. So if you're not here when your slot is up, we'll give you a chance, and then we'll move forward to the next person on the list, and hopefully we'll get through some of the folks on the waiting list. So our first speaker for tonight is Elizabeth Singletary. Am I saying her last name right, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Great. And so I'm just going to hand it right over to you, and I'll start the timer. And thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being the first brave person to read, and welcome.
Good evening, everyone. The piece that I wrote that I'm going to read is "Awake Our Hearts." It's Value and Brokenness, but I submitted it to "Awake Our Hearts." And "Awake Our Hearts," they submitted something to Writing for Your Life. So I took the challenge and I wrote the piece "Value and Brokenness." As I entered the next exhibit at the museum, I was aghast at the broken pieces on the floor and appalled someone would destroy museum property and walk away. When I attempted to pick up the broken pieces, I was stopped by the guard who exclaimed, "That's a precious artifact. Please do not touch." While she continued talking, I could hear the voice of the Lord telling me to see the value of the broken pieces in my life. As the guard explained the significance of the broken pieces of the exhibit, I only heard the parallel of my life to the priceless artifacts. What an awesome revelation. In 2013, my crumbling walls were about to come down. I had already lost a dear one. I was estranged from my family. Long-standing friendships were over, and my career had become stagnant. That was not expected at this point in my life, and feelings of hopelessness settled in. Boom! The bulldozer knocked the walls down with a breast cancer diagnosis. What do I do now with no barriers around me? No close family, no friends, a stationary career, and no motivation. Only one thing to do: cry. After the walls came down, I cried and cried for days until some of the pain was released, and I took time to pray. I asked the Lord to remove the toxins in my body and my heart. The cancer treatment encompassed the whole phase of healing for all my brokenness. The first was to accept the cancer diagnosis and all the sadness and disappointment that had occurred. It did not matter how much I cried, none of what happened would change. The next phase was to get treated. No wound can heal well without the proper ointment and dressing. I had to forgive from my heart, not my mind. I had to forgive myself, forgive others, and ask for forgiveness. The third phase was to get past the hurt. It was futile to hold on to sadness and despair when time had moved on. The scars may still be there, but the pain dissipated. The final phase was perseverance, keep it moving. Each day was a new day filled with its own rewards and challenges. It was a day that was different than the one before, and a day that would never come again. I would not have imagined the brokenness I felt from those heart-rending experiences to become the nucleus of change in my life. The value was in the lessons learned. The value was acknowledging my shortcomings and failures. The value was in taking responsibility for my own actions. The value was in opening my eyes to new possibilities and new experiences, just like this one. I feel more valuable today than I did before the diagnosis and the series of misfortunes. Whatever this journey takes me, I hope it will be a legacy that will inspire others to find value in their brokenness. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Elizabeth. So how do we affirm the speaker? Any feedback?
I want to share a line that stood out to me. I had to forgive from my heart and not my mind.
Thank you. That's a great one.
That's exactly what I was going to say too. There's so much that we intellectually know to do and say we're going to do, but we don't do from our heart.
I like the way you affirmed, gave yourself time to lament and cry for a few days. I think our culture minimizes that need, a human need we have to lament first, then before we can cognitively process what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you.
And just thank you for the authenticity, Elizabeth. It's just, we need so much more of that in our world. So I heard that.
Also a sense of vulnerability.
Yes.
I love that you said that you were better now, because a lot of times when we go through trials, we don't think better will ever come.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to thank you for sharing your power with us.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. It was encouraging to hear you write about your I don't want to use this word, but it was encouraging as a fellow breast cancer survivor. It was encouraging to hear your story, your testimony. And it's good to hear people speak about being broken, because in the world we live in today, we're supposed to be all together all the time. And that's just not true. And it's encouraging to hear people write authentically about that.
Thank you. I had a lot of wonderful people, what I call my healing team, that whether they called me or were there for the full duration, I just thank God all the time for them, because they were the people He put in my life to get me past it. They let me cry for a minute, but they didn't let me cry for a while. And I am so grateful to each and every one of them.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and thanks everyone for that feedback. And Elizabeth, we need to move on to the next speaker because our 5 minutes is up, but just remind us, what did you say at the beginning? What are you hoping to do with this piece? Are you hoping to publish it?
This was already published in Awake Our Hearts.
Okay.
Yes,
beautiful.
It was published in Awake Our Hearts, and they put a piece in on Writing for Your Life. That's why.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, congratulations. If you have a hyperlink, like if it's online, if you could put it in the chat bar, that'd be great so we can read it.
Okay.
And then if anybody has feedback for Elizabeth that they didn't have time to give, please go ahead and put it in the chat bar. And what we're going to do is, if you have feedback for somebody, just please make sure you put their name at the beginning, because we're going to start moving through our speakers fairly rapidly. So if you want to give additional feedback to Elizabeth, just write her name in the chat and you can type it out. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for going first. And that, I agree, a beautiful, authentic, and honest piece.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Suzanne Nadell.
Hello.
And Suzanne, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and your book and whatever you want to say, and your time has started. So go ahead.
Awesome. And Kate, you'll have to cut me off because I just get talking. So I'm going to be reading from my book, Wired to Lead, which was published in March by Chalice Press, launched March 3rd. It's Wired to Lead, being the leader the church didn't think you could be. And it's based out of a very conservative upbringing of a pastor's kid. was wired to lead like my dad, his words, but going into the ministry or full-time pastor was never an option. So I ended up going into TV news, which was an industry that embraced me, and I've climbed all the way to the top, leading the #1 local newsroom, WSB, in Atlanta. So the book is full of life lessons and leadership lessons for women who are wired to lead, who may have felt like their voice has been crushed. And I'm going to read until Kate tells me to stop from chapter 1, because it's a book. It's a chapter that, you know, I weave in stories from the newsroom and experiences in there, and this one has some more of the experiences in there. So the first, it's divided into different sections, and the first section is justice and ethics according to Jesus. So chapter 1 is dismantle unconscious biases, just like Jesus did. I was working in an Atlanta newsroom during the fallout of the murder of George Floyd. A peaceful protest in our city led to a violent night of looting and vandalism, which led to a week of nightly protests. The governor called in the National Guard and police to maintain order. Just as that ended, an unarmed man named Rayshard Brooks died when police shot him as he ran away. The city erupted. The restaurant where the shooting happened was torched. I've been in other newsrooms when Black men were shot and killed by police. I also worked the night 8 people died in 2 cities in metro Atlanta because a man who claimed to be a Christian said he was trying to eliminate sexual temptation by gunning down Asian women. I've been a part of passionate exchanges in newsrooms, exchanges about what information is relevant to a story, what is enough source information to report, what details are not necessary to convey the story adequately, what thoughts, statements, or perspectives only feed a narrative that we already know isn't true. Then there are the opinions that surface about the particulars. Do past drug charges have anything to do with a man being shot in the back by a police officer? Or do those past drug charges explain why he ran? Does voicing such information plant a narrative seed in the community? See, he's a bad guy. Is bringing up a decade-old prostitution charge involving a woman who was gunned down at a spa relevant to the story? Or does that feed a narrative created by a system that sexualizes Asian women only to victimize them again, even in their death? Anyone who thinks such discussions and the decisions on what to report are taken lightly hasn't been in any newsroom of which I've been a part. It's in covering such stories that I've learned about the power of unconscious bias and the devastating role it plays in discriminating against others, usually because of that person's race or gender. It pains me that I did not learn about unconscious bias in the church. I cannot remember a single occasion on which a preacher addressed bias and equality from the pulpit or a Sunday school teacher taught about it in one of my childhood classes. However, I applaud my parents for addressing racial prejudice in our house. My dad, who went to Bible college in a diverse city in the 1960s, had a roommate named Robbie, a Black man from Barbados. He and his family were always part of our lives. My dad told stories of situations in which Robbie had been discriminated against and how even people my dad loved had reacted poorly when he brought his roommate home to visit. It still grieved him years later, and he made sure we kids knew discrimination is wrong. My dad had no tolerance for people using certain words around us to describe people of color. I vividly remember him shutting down a family member for using the N-word. My dad was well versed in the civil rights movement, and when anyone brought someone diverse to our town or church, he made them feel welcome. After those visits, he explained to us the difficulties such folks often face in a small, homogeneous town like ours, and how we felt for them. The subject that didn't come up in these conversations was the inequality some people face due to discrimination. The why behind people's actions he never discussed, with the exception of explaining why some people describe some people of color as good ones, a description I never heard others use of white people. This created a narrative in my mind that I didn't even realize existed until I was in my 40s. Because my parents were very loving, accepting, and understanding compared to many people, I thought I understood how to make a difference and combat racial injustice. Because people in my church opened their arms to Robbie and his son when they visited from Barbados, I thought I was surrounded by nice people. I remained oblivious to the discrimination many people of color face every day, even from otherwise kind, well-intentioned people. It wasn't until after the 2017 Charlottesville, Virginia Unite the Right rally of white supremacist organizations that I heard a pastor of a church I attended say, "This is wrong." Tony stood on stage that Sunday after all of America had watched scenes of Nazi flags flying and KKK members marching and boldly said that as Christians, we cannot be silent about this atrocity towards God's children. He was right. Nothing about that rally represented what Jesus taught us to do when he commanded us to love each other as he first loved us. Furthermore, sitting and watching it while claiming that some of the people in the crowd that day were good people and that the media members sensationalized the message of hate was just as wrong as actively participating in the march itself.
Suzanne,
Tony.
I'm going to have to stop you.
Yeah, it's like, I need it.
So powerful. The lesson is y'all have to buy Suzanne's book. Can you give us the title again? Suzanne, Wired to Lead, just
Yes.
came out in March. Can you lift it up again? Wired to Lead. Tell us the subtitle again.
Being the leader the church didn't think you could be.
Great. And I'm going to put in the chat, we did an in-depth interview with Suzanne recently, and I'm going to put that link in the chat so you can learn more. But wow. And hearing you read it is amazing. And, you know, I'll just say one thing and then we need to move on to the next speaker, which is, you know, I know that when we talked in the interview, you said maybe this is kind of like a little dated because 2020, you know, it's a couple of years ago, but like actually it just feels timeless. Like I think George Floyd is a person we're going to be talking about for the next, you know, centuries. I mean, I think his death was that traumatic to our nation's consciousness and important. So I think that I think your book is really timeless. So congratulations on this publication.
Thank you.
All right, our next, and you can give more. I encourage everybody to give Suzanne some feedback in the chat bar. Just put her name first so we know who it's for. Suzanne, give her some feedback. And Georgina, I know you're online. I saw your name. If you want to go, you're up next. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be here. I'll be reading from a children's book, so switching genres. This is Choose to Believe. It's the first in a series of books that speaks to how we can invite God to minister into our children's big feelings. And the hope is that we discover the truth in what we choose to believe, and hopefully it empowers children and adults alike. This will be released later this year from my publishing company, Mighty Kids Publishing House. So let's see how far I can get in the 5 minutes. Far from the forest, in a cage by a tree, little elephant dreamed and longed to be free. To be free to run in the woods far beyond. To be free to play with the ducks in the pond. To be free to smell the sweet roses and sage. To be free to frolic outside of her cage. Then the patter of feet woke her up from her dream as a lion emerged through the sunlight's first beam. Little elephant, he said, let me unlock this door. There's a world out here waiting for you to explore. With a twist and a turn, with a swivel and clang, the lion swung open the door with a bang. But instead of a joyful smile or a cheer, little elephant froze, filled with doubt and great fear. While she dreamed of the day she was finally free, deep down in her heart, she was scared as could be. This cage was her home. It was all that she knew. What if living outside was too hard to do? With each of her worries, a what if appeared. They buzzed all around, fueled by all that she feared. While there's nothing wrong with a what if or two, when they get too loud, they'll drown out what's true. What if you're too big? What if you're too small? What if you're too different or no one likes you at all? And that's what happened in little elephant's head. The what ifs ran amok with all that they said. So instead of the hopes and the dreams that she had, the what ifs turned the good into something bad. What if running is tricky and you fall on your face? What if ducks are not friendly and give you a chase? What if roses smell icky and you can't find a sage? What if life is too hard for you outside your cage? The lion spoke gently as hope filled his eyes. He wasn't dismayed by this what if surprise. Little elephant, switch your focus to me. I'll show you how brave God made you to be. You were made to move mountains, to part the great seas, to rise after falling through prayer on your knees. You were made to build bridges and break down strong walls, to do the impossible, all when God calls. The what ifs grumbled and started to fret. The what ifs looked oh so very upset. What if lion is wrong and you're just not that tough? What if elephants fail at the really hard stuff? Said the lion, still quite tender and kind. Let's try to calm all these thoughts in your mind. Take a few deep breaths, then repeat loud and clear. I believe God instead of my fear. Little Elephant still wasn't sure what to do. She wanted to trust that what God says is true, but her tummy felt icky and her head downright dizzy. She couldn't think straight with her mind in this tizzy. So she imagined her worries all filling God's hand. Then he carried them off to a far distant land. Next, she counted to 3, and after pausing to breathe, said, I want to trust God. Please help me believe. My dear little elephant, your mind can't conceive how much is possible if you'd only believe. And if doubt and fear try to creep in your head, you can choose what voice will be louder instead. Choose to believe you are strong, brave, and bold. Choose to believe in the courage you hold. Choose to believe God is right by your side. If you ask and believe, have faith, he'll provide. And above all else, believe this is true. Your Father in heaven is rooting for you. So if you get scared, ask him to draw near. His love has the power to drown out all fear. Believe in his love and the hope that it brings. Believe you are cradled in the shadow of his wings. Believe you are stronger than you might feel today, for the Lord will strengthen you each step of the way. Little Elephant prayed God would steady her heart and show her the way as she made a new start. Buzz off, you what ifs, I have places to be. I can do all things when God strengthens me. Then all of a sudden, Little Elephant's feet drummed up the tune to a new kind of beat. She spun and she twirled. Her feet did not stop till she trampled that cage and ran free from that spot. Remember,
I think we're going to have to stop you, but oh my goodness, this is incredible. I'm so sorry. I mean, it's so hard to stop. It's so beautiful. The comments are flowing in the chat bar. Your reading voice is incredible. It's so beautiful. I'm just having to be the bad guy here.
No worries. We were at 2 pages, so we were at the end. So no worries at all.
Well, if you only have 2 pages left, maybe you should just finish it up.
It's
Do you
up
have
to
2
you.
pages left? Okay, I think we all need to hear the end. In this case, we're going to make an exception.
I'll try to get it really quick. All right. Remember, if fear ever comes up to you, choose to believe that what God says is true. But on days when it's hard to believe what God said, and the what ifs are yelling too loud in your head, first take some deep breaths and count 1, 2, 3. Next, pray for the strength to be brave, bold, and free. Now speak to your fear as loud as you need and say all things are possible. I choose to believe. Thank you for letting me go over.
Amen. Congratulations. Well, we do need to stop, but like I said, the comments are flowing into the chat bar. So, beautiful. Congratulations. Can you just tell us again, where can we find your work and where can we find your new book?
New book will be released later this year. My website, you can find me at georginaowino.com. And as of tomorrow, you can find the books on choosetobelievegod.com.
Awesome.
Not live today, but tomorrow, choosetobelievegod.com.
So please put that in the chat too, if you can put your links. And I just want to say, I love the line when you're talking about the what ifs, they will drown out what's true if if you're not careful. So congratulations. Beautiful. So beautiful. Beautiful in every way. Congrats. All right, Ken, you're up. Wow. What an amazing start to this night. Ken is a return reader. So Ken, are you here?
Yes.
Thank you again, Regina. All right, Ken, it's up. You're up.
Okay. I do a First Friday blog on my Facebook page, and this is one from last fall, but it just got picked up by the Pastoral Counseling Center here in Des Moines, Iowa, and was published in their newsletter today. So, and then when I read it again, it was like, oh, This still sort of fits. So this is In the Fog. Fog fills the world beyond my window this after-election morning. Cold autumn air raising the ghost of recent rains. Behind the curtain of cloud, shadows loom where trees lately stood, and all the colors of the world shift toward gray. Carl Sandburg wrote that the fog comes on little cat feet. I'm not seeing any cats, but I just caught a glimpse of a small bird launching from a bent prairie stem, like a pole vaulter flexing the fiberglass. One central truth about fog: it makes it hard to see. The weather folk describe its severity in those terms: less than a mile visibility, less than a quarter mile. This morning, I'm guessing the visibility is less than 100 feet. The densest fog I ever drove through arose from warm air passing over late winter snow in the dark of evening. The center line on the highway was only visible as a dash, followed by nothing, followed, hopefully, by another dash. I needed the headlights, but they hurt as much as they helped. More light meant more glare and less vision. The fog was so thick, I drove right past my exit. Couldn't see it. I had to take my cue from the Christmas Magi and travel home by a different way. Fog renders visibility variable. At times, I've seen the road stretching ahead with the fog no more than a haze on the horizon. At other times, the fog was so close I could barely see the white line edging the highway. I find the future is like that. Some days I can see the future stretching out ahead of me with what feels like assurance and clarity. Other days, the future hides behind the fog, unknown and unknowable. This foggy morning after the election morning is one of those latter days. What happens now? How will the future unfold? The fog has settled in and visibility is low. I've run into this a time or two before. The future I imagined, the future I had made my peace with, suddenly torn from my grip. What I learned then, and am reminding myself now, is that I don't know what the future holds. Never did, really. The future I see in my mind's eye turns out to be a work of fiction, an act of imagination assembled from fears and hopes and present trends continued. Sad to say, the actual future, what takes place tomorrow or next week or 7 years from now, may be very different from the future in my head or yours. What will it be? The crystal ball is cloudy. We're in the fog, and it's hard to see ahead. We may have to slow to a shuffle, at least for a while. Feel our way along. Send out sonar pings like bats and listen for the echoes. At least until the fog fades and we can see the road again.
Thank you so much, Ken. We have about 40 seconds. So I'll just start with feedback, and then if others want to chime in, I just really appreciate the image of the fog. I think that's so evocative and true and really rings, just really clear. I'm taking a history class right now, and just how much we can't see what's happening right in front of us. So I really appreciate that. Elizabeth, I think you were going to chime in with some feedback, so go ahead.
No, I actually realized that the mic was on and I turned it off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Others want to affirm the reader, Ken, or any suggestions for next time? Thumbs up from Elizabeth. Got some more thumbs up coming in. Oh, lots of thumbs up. Thank you, Ken. That was really beautiful. And Ken, if you can, I know you said this was just published. So again, if you can put the link in the chat, I think that would be great because I would love to reread this. This is really, I think, a timely and beautiful piece. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Our next speaker is it pronounced Terrell?
Tennille.
Tennille. I'm sorry, Tennille. Tennille. Thank you. Tennille Register. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Tennille, you're up. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. What a special time to spend with you here. Ken, I'm also in Iowa. That doesn't happen often that you find other Iowans. So the piece that I'm going to read tonight was published in Joyful Life magazine a couple of years ago. And there were some things in there that I shared publicly for the first couple of times. And as I continue to write, I self-published a book in December on handling grief through the holidays. And I'm continuing to encounter a need and a desire to talk about grief in a wider spectrum than only being about death, but to include death. And so I wanted to read this and get feedback as I think about developing this topic into a larger publication. The title is Praise Him in the Pain, Practical Steps to Drawing Near to God in the Hard Times. There's an extra seat at the table this year. As my children dip their fingers in the mashed potatoes, they briefly notice the extra chair and wonder if I've lost my ability to count, and then sneak a roll from the counter on their way through the kitchen. I'm going through the motions this year and doing my best to provide traditions and memories for those I love. But in my heart, I feel the tug of frustration at trying to keep up with normal. The whispers in my head ring so loud it drowns out the chatter in the room. I didn't think it would be like this. Nothing feels right. I just don't feel like celebrating. I wait until we sit down. I share that the extra plate and open seat at the table represent the ones who are not with us. Most seated at the table assume I'm speaking of my husband's parents and my grandparents who passed years ago. But for me, it's more. The chair represents my prodigal brother, who in my best hopes will spend the day at a shelter, but more likely will spend it in the streets, or perhaps unaware that today is even a special day. The chair represents our children, who in our blended family are 1,000 miles away, gathering with their other side of the family. The chair represents a best friend who took his own life, leaving his family behind. And the chair represents my father, who is spending another holiday in his cell. The extra chair originated as a way to remember loved ones when you gather at the table. Not only is the chair a symbol of remembrance, but it also gives permission to move on with traditions in spite of loss. However, over time, for me, the chair has become less specific. Rather than simply representing a place saved, that extra chair represents that there is room for grief at the table. There is room for tears, pain, and confusion, even at a table that is set for celebration. Too often, when I think of seasons of grief and darkness, I picture the older widow alone at the holiday, or of sinking depression, finding me alone in the quiet. However, in my own life, grief hasn't always played out that way. Pain and loneliness can find me even in a room full of people. Our loss may not be the same as the person sitting next to us at the table, but we can be assured that each person carries hurt and grief. When I find myself clouded by darkness or feel numb to those around me because of my own fresh hurt, how do I move through it? How do I make room for both pain and joy at the table? And I'm going to jump down a bit. Let beauty and pain coexist. God designed for loss and joy to live hand in hand in a way that doesn't always make sense to my earthly mind. We see the ultimate mix of grief and celebration in our very own salvation. After all, it is in Jesus' death and pain that we find eternal life and joy. So although at times I might feel like I must package up my pain for the sake of the celebration, that is simply not true. There is room for both grief and joy at the table. And of course, it goes on to give practical application.
Thank you so much. So again, we have about 40 seconds. I see some applause, some thumbs up. I just want to say I love the idea, the broader idea of exploring grief beyond the context of just death. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about in my own life. So I really applaud that effort and encourage you in that. And, I was wondering, as you were talking about the extra chair at the table, if you were explicitly, in the Jewish tradition of the Seder, there's an extra table set for Elijah. So I was wondering if you were kind of explicitly evoking that, and maybe that's something you could address. We maybe have time for one more comment, and then we need to move on, or people can put folks in. I know there's a couple other comments that have already come in the chat. Does anybody want to come off mute and say anything?
I did.
Like to, because I was just going to say the same thing about Elijah at the Passover table, and inviting, it's hospitality, but being able to invite in the grief and the sorrow and hold that, as well as welcoming the stranger and the others who come to our doors. But it was beautiful. Thank you.
And I heard one more comment. Thank you, Joanne. Does somebody else want to chime in?
That
Yeah,
was me. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Go
I already
ahead.
wrote my comment.
Oh, I submitted a piece to Local Gems, and I wrote a piece on grief. So thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of times people hide their grief, or they remain bitter in their grief. So I started on some things to tackle what most people don't like to deal with.
Thank you. All right, I'm sorry we have to move on. This was so beautiful and rich. My cat agrees. She's here in the background. Thank you so much. And again, Lisa did type her comment in the back. So Denise, you're up. Is it Denise Gooseby? Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are. Thank you so much. And
you're
I'm
up.
so blessed to be here tonight. I was actually here 4 years ago reading a part of a book that I had published then. And so I'm going to read a short devotion from a book that I'm compiling now. The book is called Can You Pray Like a Third Grader? And so is the devotion. You are young, but don't let anyone treat you as if you are not important. Be an example to show the believers how they should live. Show them by what you say, by the way you live, by your love, by your faith, and by your pure life. 1 Timothy 4:12. Sometimes the student becomes the teacher. That's what my third grade class became for me last week. I had asked them to write in their journals about what prayer was for them, how they felt, what they did. I figured I would get a few cute sentences about bedtime prayers and grace said at meals. My mouth dropped. Their words were beautiful and insightful and humbling. To God, I would pray with such love, reverence, and faith. I asked them if I could share some of their writings in this devotion. One little girl had this to say about prayer. When I pray, I mean it with all my heart. Also, when I have bad dreams, I wake up. I pray to God. I say, Dear Jesus, I rebuke the devil from my mind. Then I fall back asleep, and I'm okay. I also hope that in the future, God will save me and my family and friends. I love the Lord, my Savior, my life, my soul, my everything. That's why I love God, and I mean it when I pray. Amen. Can you hear the simple conviction in her words? No doubt, no uncertainty, just pure faith. Another student shared this. When I pray, I close my eyes. I think of the things I'm grateful for. I also ask for a good day. And I also ask that the homeless get a house. I also pray for a good day. And that is it. Wow. Prayers of gratitude, guidance, and God's grace for the less fortunate. To this student, God not only exists, but he is also nearby, and he cares. It gets better. Another student wrote this. When I pray, I ask to give me wisdom. The reason I want wisdom is because I want to know right from wrong. I also want him to forgive me, and I hope I have everlasting life. Amen. And this young man confided, when I pray, I bow my head and close my eyes. I talk to God and tell him to forgive me. Yesterday, my mom prayed for me to get better. At the end, I say amen. I am trying to pray as much as I can. I talk to God. Out of the mouth of babes. My students reminded me that is simply talking to God. I open my heart and boldly express my love for him. I speak belief and trust in him by sharing my fears, hopes, needs, and desires. I bring others before him, and I thank him for being a great and awesome and loving Father. Oh God, help me to pray like a third grader.
Oh man, beautiful. Again, seeing some applause in the videos and some thumbs up. Denise, you've gotten several comments already about the title. Can you repeat the title? Was it Teach Me to Pray Like a Third Grader?
Can you pray like a third grader?
All right, great. Love it.
And that's going to be the title of the devotional.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank
Well,
you.
we're at our time, so we don't unfortunately have time for comments, but I think I speak for everybody. That was really beautiful, and just want to offer you encouragement and gratitude for this piece. So for those who want to give additional feedback to Denise, please type it in the chat. I see some incredible, beautiful, so people are really
Thank you, everyone.
All right, our next speaker is Joanne Tipple. Joanne, are you ready?
I am. Thank you. This is my first time. I have nothing published, but I write sermons almost weekly and have tried to finish something that I've started. So the title of this, I'm not reading the whole thing through. I'm just going to stop at time, and whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. So the title is It's Time. It's 5:15 a.m. I'm sitting in Ocean Grove, New Jersey, in Grove Hall, the retreat center. It's the She Is Called gathering. Reformed Church in America women invited from all over to come and take Sabbath rest. It's my first year, but it's time. At 4:44, I awoke and the words, "It's time" came. My story wants and needs to be told. I've told it before, sometimes ad nauseum. I've written and written, spoken and respoken. I realize now that those were the first, second, 44th, and 100th versions. The story's been told and revised a gajillion times, and this could still be another rewrite. I've been trying to tell this story since the beginning, my beginning, anyways. I stopped and started, wrote and rewrote. Stories are how we make sense of things, and there was a lot to try and make sense of. I'm at a women's retreat in Women's History Month, and I believe, no, I know it's no mistake, no mere coincidence that this is happening now. So many signs along the way. My roommate, Patrice, she is more than just a signpost on this journey. She is a neon sign that I've asked God to provide for me several times over. So many other things that I am only now just realizing were the affirmations that I am where I am meant to be. My favorite illustration, or one of them, because I don't really do favorites, is that of Michelangelo being asked about how he created David out of marble. He replied, and I'm paraphrasing, that David was already in the marble. It was only the artist's job to remove what didn't belong, and David would emerge. This is what our journeys are about. We are in the marble, the precious stone, and our life experiences, guided by the master artist's hands, are revealed as we live through each day, sometimes well, and sometimes not so much. I would much prefer not to be doing this at this time of the day. I'm tired, but I want to do this and I have to do this. And if I can't at least come close to completing this work, this creation, I'm pretty sure I will be frustrated because of the repeated pattern in my life of starting and stopping, or at least of starting, but only being able to sprint and not marathon, so to speak. But I'm a sprinter then, not a marathoner, and I don't fit into the boxes that society has created, and I don't think many of us do. We acclimate. We are encouraged and sometimes forced to. It's not out of a desire to harm, at least not at its core. It's about trying to find order within chaos. And creation started in chaos. And however we understand God, well, God put order to that chaos. And so order comes to our lives. Now I'll stop there, but it keeps going.
Thank you so much. Well, we have about a minute for feedback, so I'll start and then others can chime in. I really appreciated that. And I love the image you evoked of the, the marble and cut away everything that's not the thing. And the way you applied that to your own life. So I just love that image and the way you used it. So thank you so much for that. Other comments and did you remind us, did you have a title?
It's Time.
It's Time. Okay. And I know you have a couple of Lynn said, go ahead.
I had two images that stood out to me. One was more of like that sticky phrase, stories are how we make sense of things. That really stood out to me. And then we talk about looking for a sign, and you called it like, I'm looking for a neon sign. And I think that has a really powerful stretch.
Great feedback. Any other comments? Thank you so much, Joanne. I can feel your preaching voice in it too, sort of your turn of phrase. It was clear to me that you're a preacher as you were reading. So I don't know if that, that is just what it is, but I could feel it. All right, great.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Kate.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for your bravery. All right, well, we're going to keep moving. This is just such a wonderful lineup of folks. Next is Kim Booker. Kim, are you ready to go?
Hi, this is my first time.
Great, welcome.
Thank you. I'll be reading something that is one way that a traumatic event has affected me. Living in the shadow of a ghost. I've been awakened countless times by my own blood-curdling screams. As a little girl, the scene was always the same. As I flailed underneath the sheets in terror, my aunt and older cousins ran into the bedroom. They woke me up from that dream state, and terrified me would ask, was that a monster in my mommy's bed? And they silently glanced at one another as they tended to me. The nightmares did not end as time went by. When I was a teenager, it happened once during a sleepover at the home of a family member. My screams reverberated throughout the entire house. Everyone in the living room where we were camped out bolted upright like toy soldiers. I was so embarrassed as my heart pounded in my chest. You see, for the majority of my life, I have lived in the shadow of a ghost. What does that mean? Is it possible? Do ghosts have shadows? Do they even exist? The ghost whose shadow I lived in is my mother, Annabelle. In 1967, she was heinously murdered in our Philadelphia apartment by my father using a bow and 5 steel-tipped hunting arrows. But when I wandered into the bedroom that night, to my 3-year-old eyes, my mother must have looked like a monster. And those buried images randomly crept up and haunted me in vivid dreams until my 20s. I've been told that my mother was bright, witty, fun, and beautiful. Everyone loved and admired her, family, friends, and even acquaintances. Several times I met people who, upon hearing my name, asked, "Are you Annabelle's daughter?" Followed by, "Your mother was such a wonderful person, and she was so beautiful. You look just like her. You look just like her." I've heard that more than a few times in my life, along with the proclamations of how much she loved me. This is interesting because when I see pictures of her, I only see a slight resemblance. My mother was thin and graceful. I am curvy and awkward. She wore glasses and I do not. She had a thin face and mine is wide. She was stylish and I am plain. But whenever people say I look like her, I assume maybe I do, but just don't realize it. Sometimes people have treated me like I was the ghost of my mother, not as if her disembodied spirit had inhabited me or that I was her reincarnated. But it seemed like some people had superimposed her image onto me and saw me as a reflection of her. Although they didn't do it intentionally, I think it was their way of keeping their sister, their aunt, their friend alive. That's why I look like her to them, even though I didn't really look like her. I'm the most poignant living reminder that they had. The problem is having to bear the burden of my own grief as well as my family's has caused me much suffering. I'm aware that it came from their own place of pain and loss, but it has always felt unfair. In the middle of numerous conversations with family members, they have randomly said things like, I can't believe what happened to your mother. It's hard to accept that she's gone. That really tore this family apart. Then I will patiently listen to them, walk down memory lane, and the pain of not having my own conscious memories to share always welled up inside. This made dealing with my family difficult at times because it seemed like they didn't see me as an individual, but as all that's left of Annabelle, the one who kept her memory alive, and that kept the past very much in the present and affected my ability to heal. Not surprisingly, the tragic event and its aftermath greatly impacted my life. I often felt insignificant, even invisible, and questioned whether God truly loved me. I struggled with who I am and where I fit in. It's been a lot to navigate, especially as a child. Suddenly losing my mother and being placed in the care of relatives was very traumatic. However, God has been walking me through a layered process of healing. In my late 20s, I felt compelled to go to the Philadelphia courthouse and research the murder trial. Throughout my life, I had heard different versions of what happened. So many people had their opinions, and for some unknown reason, they felt it necessary to share them with me. The only one not present to tell her story was my mother. So I went in search of an unbiased view. And then I saw the actual photographs taken at the crime scene after her death. It was after that when subconscious met conscious and the nightmares that had haunted me since I was a young child suddenly ended. For some reason, seeing those images as an adult did something that I still don't fully understand. The grueling task of trudging to the courthouse day after day for weeks, combing through hundreds of documents and viewing photographs was worth it. I got through it because I felt the presence of the Lord. He led me to do it, and it brought a level of healing. I cried out to God in deep anguish many times and asked him endless whys. Why did my mother die such a horrible death? Why have I been left to suffer the aftermath of such a thing? And after the murder of my brother 20 years later, why? The answers to those and many other questions never came. That added another layer of anguish. At times, my heart hurt so much that it felt like it would burst out of my chest. Not understanding why has at times been excruciatingly difficult to accept. I have cried out to the Lord in agony more times than I can remember. How can this possibly work together for my good? But it doesn't change the fact that God is sovereign and loving, and he has been with me through it all. Another level of healing.
Kim, I have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we're a little over 5 minutes. So
Okay.
Wow, what an incredible piece. And all I kept thinking while you were reading was this just really could be a book. What a huge amount you have there. You've suffered such a huge loss, and then the way you're processing it, the way that you're talking about it being juxtaposed with your family's experiences, like just it's so much sort of content, and you summarize it so well. And I think you could even like build it out into a book and take more time with each one of these experiences. So I just want to thank you for sharing with us, and just to encourage you to keep writing, because I think you have a lot to say and a lot to explore yet.
Thank you. That people have been saying that to me, and I've been avoiding it. I actually did start a book as fiction called The Forgotten Child, but it's a lot. I'm 61 years old now, and it's been a lot, and I just haven't known if I could go back and relive some of those things to write it, but this may be confirmation that I need to do it.
Well, and I just want to, again, we need to move forward, but I just want to say, I think turning it into fiction might be a good way to handle that. And I have a dear writer friend who did just that. She had an intense autobiographical experience, and she started writing it as a memoir, and then she pivoted to write it as a novel. And I've actually thought about having her on as a guest speaker to talk about how she made that pivot from memoir to novel, because of course, much of the novel, there are autobiographical links to it. So I think that is a genre that you could really explore and could maybe give you more freedom. And one of the benefits is you can write into scenes where you weren't there. Like if you wanted to write about your parents' relationship or what happened with your father and the death and the murder, you could do that. So
That's
Maybe
exactly
maybe
what-
this is a nudge for me too, to
Yeah.
have a workshop. So
It is, because it's exactly what I did. I started with my parents. Obviously, I
Yeah.
wasn't there,
Yeah.
but my birth and everything. And
Yeah.
so
I think that's a good idea.
observation.
I'll put the title
Thank
of her. I'll put the title of her novel in the chat bar so you can see it, and we'll try to have her on as guest speaker because she gives talks on this very topic. So thank you,
What's
Kim,
her
and
name?
blessings.
May I
Her
have
name is Erica Witzel. I'll put her-
Erica Witzel. Okay.
Yeah, and she
Thank
gives a
you.
talk on this, like how to do this explicitly. But blessings, and then thank you, Kim, for sharing. Really excellent.
Thank you.
All right. After Kim, we have Valerie.
Hi. So it's an honor to hear just all these amazing stories. My story is actually, I'm just going to read a short part of my personal story that was published in the small journal, To Be Inspired, Stories of Courage and Hope After Brain Injury. And the reason I'm bringing it up is I just all of a sudden just thought it would be a good time to revisit it and see if I should expand on it, because it's really just a beginning. So it's called Miracles Happen. Miracles happen sometimes. One summer, there was a group of people who prayed like maniacs for a young girl to recover from a life-threatening virus that sent her into a coma for 11 days. They acted on their faith and their prayers, and they were actually answered, and the girl lives on. This is my story. That same summer, the same group of people prayed like maniacs for a 46-year-old man and father of 5 to survive a fatal diagnosis. And that man lives on only in memory. That man is part of my story too. He was my dad. While the mischievous pendulum of life weaves tales of life and death all over the world, this story begins in a quiet northern New Jersey suburb. To look at me lying on a hospital bed in the coma, you would see an ordinary looking teen with brown eyes and a thick curly mop of shoulder length brown hair that was matted down to the hospital pillow. I am certain that the sight of me, an unresponsive girl lying still on the hospital bed, hooked up to a heart monitor and an IV pole, eyes slightly open, white tube protruding from her mouth, would make just about anyone feel the weight of an impending tragedy, especially if you happened to pass by my room day after day and saw that nothing ever changed, except the nurses checking on me or the sight of my mom sleeping by my side. You might wonder, how did this happen? What if I told you that there was no car, no bicycle, no soccer ball, no gang fight, no mosquito, no exciting story at all? Just a 16-year-old girl looking forward to her last year of high school and to life beyond New Jersey. I was a bookworm with big dreams. My face was usually burrowed behind a paperback or a glossy college brochure. I would write furiously in a spiral-bound journal about dreams, thoughts, poems, and stories. I could, and often did, get lost in the ideas, thoughts, and words and imaginings hovering on the page. One summer day, the day I fell into the coma, I got lost in a dream world for 12 days. I was in my bedroom, stretched out on the bed reading. I had just eaten a cup of vanilla ice cream, and I finally felt hopeful. I had been recovering from a case of pneumonia and had been feeling lethargic and queasy for days. But today I was able to sit outside in the sun and finally eat something more exciting than dry toast and apple juice. I read for a while longer before closing my book and turning off the light. I slept for a few hours before I felt the need to call out to Mom. It was the night the germ attacked, the night I slipped away. I called for help and I realized that I couldn't walk the short distance from my bed to the bathroom. I felt so tired, my arms and legs heavy with invisible weights pressing against every inch of my body. I felt dizzy, nauseous, and had a terrible headache. I was scared of the constant sensations of needles and pins pricking all parts of my body. Mom, please come. We returned from the 2-minute arduous trek from the bathroom to the bedroom, and I collapsed into bed. Both legs and knees just gave out, complete weakness. We did not say much to each other. I was too sick to communicate, and she was just too alarmed. What was happening to her daughter? She lay by my side, and we both fell asleep, hoping I improved by morning. I did not. I felt dizzier and weaker in my legs and arms than the night before. My surroundings were beginning to fade. I tried to get up and to get dressed, but nothing worked. I could not get my arms to move or my legs to bend. I couldn't speak. Am I almost out of time?
Yes.
So, yeah, okay, so I'll just stop there. So then this story goes on and talks about me, a little bit of the dreams I had, what happened to my dad. And basically, the story is about how do you deal with life? Some people who make it and some people who don't. And that's what I grappled with, and that's what my story's about.
Wow, Valerie. Yeah. Again, I'm seeing some applause. Yeah. Wow. Really powerful. And I really appreciated and loved the moment where you said, it wasn't this, it wasn't the mosquito, it wasn't the this, it wasn't the that, it wasn't the other thing, it wasn't the other thing. It was just this mysterious sort of medical mystery. And it just created this sense of suspense. And then sort of as you're talking about kind of being in this dream world, I'm drawn in. I want to hear more. I want to read more. I want to hear more. So I think that's always the best sign of writing, when a listener or a reader wants to get more. So that's how I'm left feeling. So we are at time, but I'm sure others have feedback for Valerie. And again, Valerie, if you have a website or some place where you write regularly, where you want to share in the chat so we can follow your work, please put that in. And if not, that's fine too. Or if you want to put a social media handle, but just again, to say that I was really gripped and thank you for reading. All right, Dawn, you were on the waiting list, but somebody dropped out. So you were a little bit over our time, but we're going to go with Dawn off the waiting list. Dawn, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And always wonderful to hear everybody else and the stories that they have to share. I'm a retired pastor, just been retired for a few months. And in that time, I've been writing brief, I hate to call them sermons, but I guess old habits die hard. And I've been posting them on my Facebook page every Sunday night. And I've been getting a lot of positive feedback. This is being not preaching for a certain church, give me a certain courage to say things that I might not have said from the pulpit, even though I wanted to. So this is a topical called The Flower of Hope. More than 30 years ago, my sister-in-law, Judy's sister Jane, spent some time in the Peace Corps in Sierra Leone, West Africa. She was a physical therapist and her skills were greatly needed amongst the poverty and lack of medical care. Sierra Leone was a rather arid and dusty part of the world, and the community she served in was very rural. On a visit to a somewhat larger village nearby, she came upon a single flower that was growing up through the cement sidewalk. Everything else rather desolate, just one flower. I'm not sure what motivated Jane, but she took a photo. When she showed it to me, I ended up writing a sermon about it. It was a sermon about persevering in dire circumstances. That flower growing against all odds served as a symbol of hope. This week, as I was meditating on the current circumstances we find ourselves in, the photo of that flower came back to mind. You see, I've always felt one goal of preaching, one of many, was to hold up God's hope. As best I understood it, I have strived to offer that hope in sermons and private conversations with people regarding their personal challenges. I have relied on God's hope in my own life and in the life of my family. But I must say, I have never felt such a need for God's hope as I do right now, as I look through the pages of our shared story as a nation and a world. We need things that will bolster our reserve. our resolve, strengthen us, little things to remind us to hold tight to the people and the things that we love and value. For me, it's a matter of faith, a matter of my desiring to live a Jesus-centric life, not a religious life per se, but a Jesus-centric life where we look out for our neighbors, look after the poor, and lift each other up. I'm concerned that we have lost our moral compass. Daily, we face more budget cuts, often doled out as retribution or punishment, cuts that affect real people and their lives, cuts to school lunch programs, Head Start, education in general, hungry kids around the world, as well as hunger at home. There are assaults through executive orders on people based on language they speak, their race, sexual orientation, or political views. Threats to everything from libraries to healthcare and nutrition. We do not want to accept these things passively as if they're okay. They're not okay, especially when they threaten the well-being of the most vulnerable. We can do better. We need to simply be kind, empathetic, and thoughtful to the very neighbors Jesus tells us to love as we love ourselves. Anything less, we need to resist with our words, actions, and prayers. So my initial thought was to tell us to be on the lookout for flowers of life so as not to be swallowed up by the darkness. It's sort of a stop and smell the roses kind of message. I stick by that thought, but there's more. Perhaps we have to be the flowers that take root and grow in the hardened soil. Maybe our very lives will be symbols of hope for one another as we work our way through the dark times. It will not make us martyrs or heroes. It will simply make us humble people that care about one another. For me, that's what faith calls us to be. A reference, 1 Peter 4:10, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another.
Amen. Thank you. And you have about 30 seconds left if others want to chime in, but I just really appreciate you speaking into the complexity and pain of the current moment politically and culturally. So thank you for speaking so truthfully about, what we're facing as a country and a world. Does anybody else want to chime in?
Yes, I would like to say, the way you read that, it gives hope even in the hard message.
Thank you.
During this hard time. It sounded very hopeful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I see there's another comment in the chat about hope, so really appreciate that. Well, we're over our hour, and sometimes in the past we've gone a little bit longer, but I actually have out-of-town guests, so we're going to need to wrap up. It's 10 minutes after the hour, but this was just, so I apologize for those on our waiting list who we didn't get to this time, but hopefully we'll get to you next time. And I just want to say to everyone who read, wow, and thank you, and just appreciating your bravery and your honesty and your incredible writing and your sharing, and everybody also who joined who wasn't planning to read and is here just to support others in the Writing for Your Life community. Thank you so much for showing up, for providing feedback, for providing encouragement. I think that's what we all need as writers and as faith-based writers, spiritual writers. So we're going to have another one of these in the fall, so please stay tuned. I'll send a special note to those who were on our waiting list with maybe giving you kind of an early heads up in case you want to get one of the early spots. But in the meantime, thank you again, everyone, for joining and for your reading, and blessings as you continue to write, edit, seek publication, and hoping we can come together again and again as a community to support one another. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thanks again. And this recording will be available online. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
God bless everyone.